2 videos in one day, huh? Quick repost to a comment left on my last video, citing the comment, quote, "Theory in science means a proven hypothesis," unquote. You'll find this sort of assertion a lot when it comes to, and this is part and parcel of this, of scientism's bigotry that I was talking about, right? The science is settled. When science is a process of discovery, right? It could never truly be settled. Could it get us closer to truth? Yeah, but, science originally, you'll find this if you research the origins of science. It was stated originally that it's not meant to provide definitive answers, right? Or even truth. But that it's a process that gets us closer to the truth but you should never expect it to ever get there, right? But because, again, there's a lot of bigotry in the scientific community, and that spills over to, all these various ideologies that want to use, quote unquote, scientific fact to prove that they are right. It's a problem that we deal with quite a bit, right? So again, theory in science means a proven hypothesis. Now, we talked about language, and this isn't a law that always holds true, right? And someone may cite that they heard that the Eskimos have this many words for snow, for example, right? Well, what are these words, right? What do they mean? You don't know. Are they talking about fluffy, powdery snow versus heavy, wet snow? Are they talking about certain size snowflake snow? How many inches of snow? Yellow snow? You know what I mean? Yeah, they have a lot of different words for snow. Well, why is that? Because snow is very important, and probably because if it's something that's really, really important to you, right, you're going to find differences in that thing, and you're going to use different words to describe these things. Whereas to us, snow, for the most part, is snow because it's not that important, right? Likewise, if you go to a cattle rancher or something, they're going to have a whole bunch of different terms for a variety of cattle, right? Or any animal for that matter. But to you, a cow is a cow is a cow is a cow. And then there's also maybe a baby cow, right? Which doesn't make any fucking sense. But this is a long ass tangent leading me to once again conclude that chances are, if we have different words describing different concepts, it's because the concepts are different in some way, shape, or form. Which isn't to say that they aren't similar, but in summation, if a theory in science means a proven hypothesis, why is it called a theory and not a proven hypothesis, or a scientific fact even? And even if it were to be called a scientific fact, that still doesn't mean that it's truth, and that's very easily disprovable. And it brings me back to the same point I just made, that science isn't here to provide truth. You could have a scientific fact, but that doesn't mean it's true, right? Because after all, way back in the day, it was a scientific fact that the earth was flat, and then we changed our mind about that, and now some people are telling us that those original people were right, right? So there's definitely some discord. There's definitely some disagreement, right? But that was a scientific fact, which it no longer is a fact. So could it have been true? No, it wasn't true. Or maybe what we believe today, for the most part, isn't true, as flat earthers will tell you. But the simple fact that there is a contradiction when it comes to these so-called scientific facts should lead you to believe that scientific fact, or fact in general, doesn't actually mean truth. And if you dig deep enough to look up what fact actually means, just because one of the synonyms might be quote-unquote truth, that still does not make them one and the same. Just look it up, right? Maybe that's a topic for another video. But again, if theory in science means a proven hypothesis, why don't they just call it proven hypothesis or a fact? Why do they still call it a theory, right? You can't just... And why are you taking the meaning of the word theory, right, and changing, like, even if scientific modifies, and it does, the word theory in a way, it qualifies it in a way, it still cannot fundamentally change the name of or the definition of the word theory, because then we would just use a different word, right? It just means that it's a scientific theory, and I already explained what that means, right? So the burden of proof on you, my friend, making that statement would be, okay, well then prove it, right? You're just saying things. You're not making an argument. You're just saying things because somebody said that, or you read an article that said that, and it sounded good to you because it satisfied your preconceived notions of whatever, right? This is not an argument. You're just saying things. So my reply to that was false. Please provide proof of germ theory, right? If germ theory is no longer a theory, oh, fuck, why do they still call it a theory and not a fact? And if indeed it is a proven hypothesis, then provide proof of germ theory. You can't do it. Provide irrefutable proof of pathogenic viruses. I've been asking for over a year now. No one's been able to do it. Why? Because it doesn't exist. And, you know, the simplest way of debunking that is the fact that there are competing theories in science, right? Unlike the germ theory, the terrain theory explains why some people get sick while others, when exposed to the same pathogens, do not, right? For this reason, it is said that on his death, Pasteur admitted, we don't know if this is true, this is what it said, right? Quote, Bernard was right, the pathogen is nothing, the terrain is everything, right? So there are two competing scientific theories in science when it comes to the theory of disease, and there are perhaps even others, right? So how can you have, if scientific theory means scientific fact, address everything I already said and explain to me how two things that contradict each other, at least to a degree, how can they be true at the same time, right? They can't. Clearly, you don't agree that two opposing views can be true because you have your own view and you're saying that I'm wrong. You're not saying that you're wrong, but you're also right, and I'm right, but I'm also wrong, right? No one talks like that because no one actually believes it, which brings me back to subjective morality, right? It doesn't matter how much these people, and again, I'm not saying that this is proof necessarily in this case, but it is proof in the case of truth and whether or not something is logical. But when people say that morality is subjective and then they act as if morality were objective, that's not evidence for them believing that, at the very least, right? That's not evidence of them believing that morality is subjective. That's actually evidence to the contrary, right? There are walking, talking contradiction. They have an internal conflict in their worldview, right? They're incoherent. They're not making any sense, right? So clearly this person believes that there is a right or wrong, that there's such a thing as truth, because they're making truth statements, right? To deny truth is to contradict yourself, because that is a statement about some kind of metaphysical statement about truth. So to even say that truth doesn't exist is to assume that truth does exist. It doesn't make any sense. Don't ever say that. That's just stupid. So the simple fact that there are different competing and at least partially contradictory theories in science, right? And the fact that truth exists and, two contrary ideas cannot be true at the same time. Scientific theory cannot mean scientific truth. I already addressed fact, but, facts are subject to change. That's why it's a different word than the word truth. So that doesn't make any sense, right? If scientific theory meant scientific fact, then there could not be competing scientific theories. And look, Wikipedia will take terrain theory, and they won't even they won't even paint it as, they won't call it terrain theory, right? Because look, I Googled terrain theory and I got germ theory denialism. I mean, how sneaky is that? They don't even want to say terrain theory because then you might look it up, see what people promoting the terrain theory are saying, and it might start making sense to you. So they just flip it on the terrain theorists and call it germ theory denialism, right? Because denialism has come to mean you're a bad person because you disagree with the scientific consensus, which doesn't exist anyway, right? That's another absurd thing to say. Unless by consensus you mean whatever the hell you want it to mean. But there is no agreement in science. If by consensus you mean agreement, then there is no agreement in science on almost anything, right? And it always tickles me when vegans will say, well, scientific consensus says that, humans are, the vegan diet is perfectly adequate for the human being, right? Well, I mean, doesn't scientific consensus say that humans are not herbivores or that humans are omnivores? And I'm sorry, but omni doesn't mean either or, it means all. So how can you even have scientific consensus? You can't. It's impossible. It doesn't make any sense. It's pseudoscientific, right? At least when it comes to that example. It doesn't exist. So, the germ theory of disease is wrong according to germ theory denialism. Do they use terrain theory anywhere in this? Maybe. But I don't even see them using terrain theory, right? Because they want to completely erase it, but not so fast. And just because you have an article saying, "Oh, that this is bullshit," well, I mean, let's examine the arguments, right? What are the arguments? Anyway, unlike the germ theory, the terrain theory explains why some people get sick while others, when exposed to the same pathogens, do not, right? That's a huge problem with the germ theory. If you're saying that these germs cause disease, then why are 95% of us with SARS-CoV-2 asymptomatic, meaning we never get sick? That doesn't make any sense, right? That's where your germ theory just falls apart. It falls to pieces. Something is wrong here, right? There are other explanations, right? Terrain theory, meaning, well, shit, if you're an overall sick individual because you don't take care of yourself, you're likely to attract certain pathogens and get sick because of that. But, while quote unquote science or some scientists want to deny, right, terrain theory, they're the real deniers here, right? The terrain theory people just want to have a debate. They want to be allowed to have a debate. Germ theory people, they don't even want to have a debate. They're the ones denying shit, right? Definitely denying the debate. But just look at it logically, right? And if your theory, scientific or not, is illogical, it cannot be scientific, right? If it's not logical, it can't be scientific. Should we be logical, right? Should we tell the truth? What is this about, right? Is this just about bullshit, or is it about truth and logic? Everything has to be true in order to be true. It has to make sense, right? And it has to be logical. Anyway, so the terrain theory says that sick tissue attracts pathogens, right? So when you cut yourself, for example, well, why do germ theory proponents tell you to disinfect the wound? Why do they want to give you antibiotics when you get into an accident or you have like a hematoma or something? Why are they giving you antibiotics? Let's say you have some kind of internal problem, right? Internal bleeding or whatever. Your skin is protecting you from germs from the outside, right? In the case of a cut, I guess you could maybe argue that, oh, well, you're more susceptible to bacterial infection because you're opened up, right? But if you have some kind of an internal problem, well, then why do they still give you antibiotics, right? Because as the terrain theory says, diseased tissue attracts bacteria. and it stimulates the growth of a certain bacteria. And if this bacteria gets out of balance, well, you could just die or get very, very sick, right? Why do germ theory proponents, or the medical industry that is based in large part on the germ theory, well, why do they talk about boosting your immune system? Now, I know they've been trying to talk about that less and less and less and less, right? Because it's all about vaccines and not actual cures, right? It's all about quote unquote disease prevention instead of just curing it. Experimental, supposed, right, disease prevention, when there are scientifically viable cures out there, scientifically proven to be viable, right? Why? But back to the original point, why are they talking about, why do we all understand that boosting your immune system, right, is important? Well, why is keeping a healthy terrain important, right? So while on the one hand they want to deny the terrain theory, they cannot escape the fact that it's a scientifically valid theory, because they use some of the theories, I guess, some of the assertions made by that theory. They abide by them, right? Because they make perfect sense. We all understand that they do. So there's, the terrain theory is perfectly scientifically valid theory, but because Big Pharma, it's anti-Big Pharma, because they want to be able to, inject you with shit to cure you. They don't want you to live a healthy life and prevent disease, right? They want you sick, in my opinion anyway. I'm sure a lot of people agree. They want you sick so they can sell you a fucking quote-unquote cure, right? So if the terrain theory were so pseudoscientific, why does the medical industry that's dominated by the germ theory, supposedly, and terrain theory is supposedly pseudoscientific, why do they act in accordance with, why do so many medical professionals act in accordance with the terrain theory? Why? It doesn't make any sense, right? Why do they give you antibiotics when you have an internal injury? The bacteria that's in you, it's already in you, right? It's not going to get in through your skin, or it's not likely to. You have a natural barrier against there's bacteria getting into your, whatever, organs or that injured area, right? Because diseased tissue attracts bacteria, right? You throw a piece of meat out there, right? A dead organism, a part of a dead organism, it's going to attract and breed all kinds of nasty bacteria, obviously, right? So the terrain theory is a perfectly scientifically valid theory. And again, and even if it somehow wasn't, right, which I just proved to you that it is, there's still this dilemma in the philosophy of science, such as theory choice, right? It's about new and controversial competing theories, right? These competing theories exist. The scientific theory that the earth is flat was a scientific theory. It was even a scientific fact at one point, but was it true? Well, some people would say yes, and some people would say no. The earth being a globe, was that true? Some people would say yes, some people would say no. It's a scientific fact right now, but that doesn't make it true, right? And just because something is a theory, that doesn't mean that it's true, and that's why it's still called a theory. It's really that simple. It really is that simple. So, a lot of these people, unfortunately, they're not critical thinkers. They don't question the presuppositions that they hold. The answer to his question was already in the video, right? I talked about the terrain theory and the germ theory. And I talked about the law of non-contradiction, right? So all he had to do is just listen, think about what I was saying critically, question his own presuppositions, and he or she would see how it doesn't make any sense to say what he just said, right? Not only is that not an argument, it's just he's just saying things to say them. The question was already answered. The assertion that he makes was already debunked in the video, right? But this brings me back to a point that I make on this channel all the time. Ideologically possessed people. Like, new information just doesn't enter. Critical thinking is not a thing. They're just NPCs that just repeat shit that doesn't make any sense. It's completely absurd and incoherent, right? If it's no longer a theory, well, why is it still called a theory? And just because you qualify a theory with another word, that's all that you're doing. You're not changing the fundamental meaning of the word theory. But according to them, you are. Well, you show me another example of where such a thing holds true, where a word changes its definition because it's next to a different word. Like, this just doesn't make sense on any level. It's completely incoherent, and unfortunately, this is the world that we fucking live in. And this is why we are in the pickle that we are in, because the average person out there is just completely and utterly fucking incoherent. They don't make any sense. You know what I mean? Anyway, that's my video. Thank you for watching.